Have you ever felt God tug on your heart in a way you couldn't ignore, even when everything around you looked completely finished? Have you ever tried to move forward, but something inside you kept telling you not to close the door just yet? Have you ever sensed a quiet shift in your spirit that made you pay attention, even though nothing on the outside had changed? When God is preparing to restore something, He often begins by working within you long before anything happens externally. You may notice emotional changes, spiritual clarity, and moments that feel too intentional to brush off. These are the signs that God is softening your heart, strengthening your discernment, and preparing you for what He plans to bring back into your life. Before someone returns, God often reveals things that show you He is still moving, still healing, and still aligning what needs to change. You start seeing growth in yourself, growth in them, and growth in the spaces where pain once lived. God begins shaping you into someone who is ready for restoration, not repetition. 1. God removes old resentment. Bearing with one another, and forgiving one another, if anyone has a complaint against another, even as Christ forgave you, so you also must do. You begin noticing that anger that once felt heavy now feels lighter, almost like God is loosening the weight piece by piece. You realize the things you replayed for months don't hit your heart the same way anymore. You start seeing that God is softening places you didn't think could soften again. You feel a quiet shift within you that makes room for something new without forcing anything. You understand that God is preparing your heart for possibilities you didn't expect. You feel God helping you release emotions you once protected, because they felt safer than healing. You see that resentment didn't just hurt the relationship, it was hurting you on the inside. You realize that the release you're experiencing is more spiritual than emotional. You understand that forgiveness isn't pretending the past never existed. It's allowing God to rewrite how it affects you. You begin noticing how emotional freedom gives you strength you didn't know you had. You start admitting to yourself that holding on to resentment kept you from seeing the truth clearly. You see times when you reacted from hurt instead of love, and God helps you acknowledge it without shame. You catch yourself thinking more about growth than blame. You begin feeling more open to understanding rather than defending your old perspective. You recognize that healing is happening in you before anything changes on the outside. You realize the resentment God is removing isn't just toward them, it's toward yourself as well. You feel God releasing guilt, disappointment, confusion, and anger that lived inside you for too long. You sense a new emotional balance forming in your spirit. You finally start understanding that God removes resentment, so your heart can hear Him more clearly, not just so someone can return. You recognize that this peace is preparing you for whatever God decides next. 2. God blocks access you tried to force. A man's heart plans his way, but the Lord directs his steps. You begin noticing that every attempt to force communication or connection seems to fall apart. You feel God interrupting your plans in ways that frustrate you at first, but later make you pause. You realize that what feels like rejection is actually protection. You sense that God is blocking what you're not ready to rebuild yet. You understand that He is saving you from creating a deeper wound by moving too quickly. You notice your effort drains you in ways that don't feel healthy or natural. You see that forced communication leaves you feeling emptier, not closer. You realize the timing feels spiritually off, even when your emotions want to push forward. You begin understanding that God blocks what doesn't align with healing yet. You accept that stepping back doesn't mean giving up. It means surrendering control. You start realizing that God blocks access because He wants transformation, not repetition. You feel convicted about areas you haven't healed from, even if the relationship resumed. You understand that returning too soon would only rebuild the same broken foundation. You recognize God wants maturity, clarity, and spiritual stability first. You realize this block is God's way of strengthening you, not punishing you. You begin to see that God's interruptions often protect you from emotional damage you can't yet see. You accept that God is preparing both hearts separately so that connection can one day be healthy. You understand that distance is sometimes the only way God can get your attention. You see that your desire to force things came from fear, not faith. You finally accept that God blocks doors temporarily when He intends to open them correctly later. 3. God gives you unexpected peace about them. The things which you learned and received and heard and saw in me, these do, and the God of peace will be with you. You begin to feel calm when you think of them, even though nothing has changed yet. You notice the tension in your spirit slowly dissolves in moments you aren't expecting. You realize this peace isn't coming from your emotions but from God's reassurance. You feel more grounded when their name crosses your mind, instead of overwhelmed. You recognize that peace is often God's first sign that something is shifting. You notice that conversations about them no longer trigger anger or frustration. You feel God giving you understanding instead of confusion. You sense emotional clarity that wasn't there before. You begin interpreting your feelings with maturity rather than fear. You realize that peace reveals readiness in your heart. You discover that peace doesn't always mean they're returning, but it does mean you're healing. You see that God is stabilizing your emotions so reconciliation wouldn't overwhelm you. You begin trusting God in ways you once avoided because you were afraid of disappointment. You realize that peace is shaping your expectations, not feeding unhealthy hope. You feel God preparing you for whatever outcome helps you grow. You start seeing God's hand in moments where you used to feel lost. You understand that peace before movement is God's way of strengthening your foundation. You recognize that true peace settles your heart even before answers arrive. You feel yourself letting go of the need to control how or when anything happens. You realize God gives peace when He is preparing your spirit for a future you can't yet see for. God strengthens your discernment. But solid food belongs to those who are of full age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. You begin sensing things more accurately about the situation without guessing or overthinking. You recognize emotional patterns that once confused you. You start noticing what feels God-led versus what feels emotionally driven. You understand that discernment grows when you stop relying only on your feelings. You feel spiritually sharper than before. You notice that you no longer confuse loneliness with love. You start separating your desires from God's direction. You feel more grounded in truth rather than pulled around by emotions. You begin realizing when someone's actions are genuine, or when they're still unstable. You sense God helping you see the deeper reality beneath surface-level interactions. You begin understanding the difference between a spiritual sign and wishful thinking. You see that discernment protects your heart from repeating patterns that once wounded you. You recognize God revealing motives, truths, and emotional shifts that you overlooked before. You feel stronger in your decisions instead of second-guessing everything. You trust yourself more because you trust God more. You discover that discernment doesn't just tell you when someone is coming back. It tells you when you're ready. You start seeing your own blind spots with humility. You understand that God sharpens your discernment to help you make healthy decisions, not emotional ones. You recognize that spiritual maturity is forming inside you. You finally accept that discernment is one of God's greatest preparations before reconciliation can happen. 5. God makes you more humble in your approach. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up. You begin noticing that you no longer feel the need to win arguments or prove your point. You feel God softening your responses and giving you more patience. You realize that connection requires humility, not emotional defensiveness. You sense yourself wanting to understand more than being right. You see that pride was blocking reconciliation more than the other person was. You start becoming more open to acknowledging your faults without shame. You realize that humility makes communication safer and healthier. You begin seeing your own emotional growth with gratitude instead of guilt. You understand that humility doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your ability to love with wisdom. You notice God building maturity inside you that wasn't there before. You recognize that humility allows you to listen differently. You stop planning your responses and start genuinely hearing what the other person is expressing. You understand that emotional humility is a major step God requires before bringing someone back into your life. You feel God preparing you to handle reconciliation with grace. You see that a humble heart is easier for God to guide. You discover that humility brings peace where pride once brought tension. You see that God is shaping you into someone who can love without losing yourself. You understand that humility prepares you to rebuild, not repeat. You feel yourself becoming emotionally safer, more grounded, and more understanding. You realize that humility is one of the strongest signs God is preparing you for something meaningful to return. As you reflect on everything God may be preparing in your life, remember that nothing He allows is wasted and nothing He restores is rushed. Your heart is growing, your clarity is strengthening, and your spirit is being shaped for something healthier, wiser, and more aligned with His purpose. Even if you cannot see the full picture yet, trust that every shift, every moment of healing, and every sign is guiding you toward a future that carries more peace than pain. Hold on to hope with maturity, not desperation, and believe that God is preparing you for what is meant to stand, not what is meant to break again. If the content inspired you, please like, comment, and subscribe to Pure Inspirational, and be blessed.